Hello student, welcome to this lesson. We want to discuss diffusion. Before we look in detail what diffusion is, so remember the physiological processes of the cell membrane, and materials move in and out of the cells through three main processes: diffusion, osmosis, and active transport. Diffusion. From kinetic theory, matter is made up of particles that are in continuous random motion. And matter is made up of three states, that is solid, liquid, and gases. In solids, the particles are at fixed positions, and because they are tightly packed, so they can only vibrate at those fixed positions. In liquids and gases, the particles are loosely held and are able to move from one point to another randomly. The particles of liquids are and those of gases can move. So the particles in gases are far away from each other compared to liquids, and you will expect diffusion to be faster in gases compared to liquids. This movement of gas or liquid particles is observed to be from regions of higher concentration to regions of low concentration. Thus, we define diffusion as the process by which particles move from a region of higher concentration to a region of low concentration. In particular, the scent of a flower or a perfume experienced by an individual is as a result of the flower scent particles or perfume particles moving from a region of higher concentration, just as your neighbor cooks chapati and you will tell the aroma in your compound. So that means the particles of the chapati will just diffuse from the neighbor's home where there is higher concentration to your compound where you have not cooked chapati, and that is where we have low concentration of the particles. Diffusion occurs until the regions have an even or uniform concentration of the liquid or gas particles. The difference in concentration of particles between the region of higher concentration and the region of low concentration is known as the diffusion or concentration gradient. So imagine you have your compound or your home where we have low concentration of the chapati particles, and the neighbor's home where there is higher concentration of the chapati particles smell. So that difference between the two positions is what we are calling the concentration gradient, and this is it. Diffusion, particles are now moving to where we have low concentration across a concentration gradient. So we want to look at this practical activity where we are using potassium manganate 7 crystals to demonstrate diffusion, and we require potassium manganate 7 crystals, glass tubing, beaker, and some water. What are we supposed to do? We hold a glass tubing vertically in a beaker so that one end of the glass that is flat rests on the bottom of the beaker. And then you drop a tiny crystal of potassium permanganate 7 through the upper opening of the tubing and close with a thumb. What follows is filling the beaker with some water. So look at this. This is the glass tubing. You are holding it vertically to rest flat on the surface of the beaker. Then you drop the crystal and then you add the water. So after some time, after that, you remove the glass tubing, and you will expect the particles now to break from the crystals, and they are being distributed throughout the water in the beaker. So having done that, you have to carefully withdraw the glass tubing so that the crystal is left undisturbed at the bottom of the beaker. So if you disturb, then you will have actually disturbed that process of particles moving from a region of high concentration, that is at the bottom of the beaker, and then throughout the water. So you are expected to make your observation after 15 minutes. What will you see? That after some time, or the 15 minutes, the purple color of the potassium manganate 7 spreads throughout the water, and eventually all the water turns purple. And what is the reason for that? The crystals of potassium manganate 7 are highly concentrated with the potassium manganate 7 particles. The crystals of potassium permanganate will break away from the large crystal, or the crystal that was dropped through the whisking tubule, through the glass tubing, dissolve in water, and then diffuse through the beaker until they are uniformly distributed. After that, then what are the factors affecting the rate of diffusion? One is the diffusion gradient, and we have talked about it a lot. A greater diffusion gradient between 2 points increases the rate of diffusion. That is very true. So the increasing the concentration of diffusion molecules also increases the diffusion. So if the particles are increased, then of course the diffusion will be faster. Gradient with corresponding regions. We are saying increasing the concentration of diffusion particles also increases diffusion gradients with corresponding regions, hence increasing the rate of diffusion. Then we have the surface area to volume ratio as another factor. Diffusion rate depends, or directly depends, on the surface area to volume ratio. The greater the surface area to volume ratio, the greater the diffusion rate will be. And low surface area to volume ratio results in low diffusion rate. Look at this table. We have this object having a surface area of 6, but the volume is 1. So for you to calculate the volume, you multiply the length by the width by the height, and it will remain 1. But for the surface area, from your mathematics, you will have to calculate the area of this side and add all the sides of the figures, all the sides of the figure. So you'll find the surface area is 6, the volume is 1. So the ratio is 6 to 1. This object is increasing in size. The surface area is 24, volume is 8. So the ratio is 3 to 1. We have this object having a surface area of 864 and the volume is 1728. The ratio of surface area to volume is 1 to 2. So this smaller object is having a larger surface area to volume ratio. But that is the small object. The larger object is having a smaller surface area to volume ratio. That means what? That diffusion rate is greater in smaller organisms, this one, than the large organisms, because the smaller organisms have a large surface area to volume ratio. As a result, most of their body parts are closer to the external surrounding, resulting in faster diffusion. That means small organisms can depend on diffusion alone as a means of transport of food, respiratory gases, and waste materials. For large organisms, diffusion alone is not enough as a means of transport and excretion. They have additional transport system and even excretory system to accomplish these processes. Organisms always lose heat to the surrounding through diffusion. That means small organisms lose a lot of heat to the surrounding compared to those large organisms. So that means energy requirements for small organisms is high because they are losing a lot of heat to the surrounding. The other factor is what we are calling thickness of membrane and tissue. The thicker the membrane or tissue, the lower the rate of diffusion, because the distance covered by the diffusing molecules is greater through the thicker membranes. The rate of diffusion is higher in thinner membranes. That is why you will find respiratory surfaces having covered by thin epithelium so that the gases can diffuse through shorter distances. The other one is the size of molecules. Small and light molecules diffuse faster or move faster than heavy and large sized particles, just as you expect a hare to run faster compared to the elephant, which is large and heavy. Then temperature is another factor. When there is an increase in temperature, the energy content of the diffusing particle increases. Thereby, they move faster. That means the rate of diffusion increases with increase in temperature. Another thing is the type of medium. Diffusion takes place in gases and liquids only, but not in solids. But it is faster in gases than in liquids because I said earlier that the particles of gases are far away from each other compared to those of liquids. Then we want to conclude this lesson by looking at the role of diffusion in living organisms. For example, what role does diffusion play in plants? It helps in absorption of mineral salts from the soil to the plant because most salts dissolve in soil water. For those salts whose concentration in soil water is higher than their concentration in the cells of root hair cells, they move into the root hair cells through diffusion. And these minerals are required for various processes like photosynthesis, among others. Diffusion also plays a role in gaseous exchange in plants because the respiratory gases, that is oxygen and carbon dioxide, diffuse across the stomata and lenticels of plants. As carbon dioxide is required for photosynthesis, and in the process oxygen is given out as a byproduct which must escape to the atmosphere during the day, and during the night this oxygen is also required or it diffuses in for the process of respiration. Diffusion also contributes to the transportation of manufactured food materials from the leaves to other parts of the plant. So photosynthesis takes place in the chloroplast, which is in the leaves, and they have to be transported to other parts of the plant. What are the roles of osmosis in animals? One, it helps in absorption of digested food materials in the alimentary canal. So the digested food materials like amino acids and glucose are in higher concentration in the blood. So they have, or in the alimentary canal. So they have to diffuse into the bloodstream so that they can be transported to other parts of the body. Osmosis is also important in gaseous exchange in animals because gaseous exchange occur at thin structures known as the respiratory surfaces. And these surfaces include the skin, gills, lungs, the tracheal system, and the cell membrane for unicellular organisms. And I had told you the gases are thin, so that I had told you that the surfaces have thin epithelium for faster diffusion. Diffusion also plays a role in excretion of nitrogenous wastes, especially in unicellular organisms like the protozoans. We are done with our lesson. Here is an assignment for you. Complete. Goodbye and see you in the next lesson.